is fantastic. It's a very exciting thing because there's a huge variety of flavours. It's, apart from anything else here in Britain, it's such a big part of our culture. It's not only a comforting thing that one turns to in a time of difficulty perhaps, it's also something that you share. So there's a real sense of kind of within the home, you sit around a cup of tea and you share a cup of tea, someone comes over for a cup of tea, families get together for afternoon tea. It's a very sociable thing, it's a very sort of happy thing, it's a kind of good clean fun somehow, and it's a lovely thing because I think it's universal. You know, most people like tea in whatever form in Britain, so it's something that we can all share and all understand.
Sophie, this is Emily. She knows everything there is to know about tea, so hopefully is going to be able to tell us how to make the perfect cup of tea for our tea party.
I know there's a lot of technique to making a cup of tea. It's not just simple pouring. So you're going to show us how to do it?
I am. So to start with, the tea I've chosen for today is a Darjeeling Second Flush, which is a really nice black tea. It's got a really lovely kind of aromatic character to it. Yeah, absolutely. Have a smell. So it's loose leaf, of course, which is very important for an afternoon tea to do it the traditional way. No tea bags here.
Why is that? Because is it just that tea bags are convenient and that's why people use them? I mean, what's the difference between loose leaf and tea bags?
Tea bags, you know, when they first came about, were a fantastic solution to brewing tea in a more convenient way. And in a way, you know, they could be better, and they get probably a very bad reputation, mainly because most of the supermarket tea bags have what's known as CTC tea inside. So the really small sort of cut tear curl, it's called, and the tea is sort of macerated to give you strength and colour and then third flavour. And what the loose tea and the sort of orthodox produced tea, which this is that it's whole leaf, so you get a really lovely full flavour. So you're getting, you know, the real focus is on the flavour and the quality of the tea, rather than the convenience. And in this occasion, obviously, we want it to taste as good as it can, so it seems appropriate. In terms of the loose versus bagged, the key is obviously giving the leaves room to unfurl. So the more they can dance around, and obviously you'll see them later dancing around in the pot a bit, the more flavour you'll extract. So the more room they have to move, the better.
I love the idea of dancing tea leaves.
I know, they really do. Well, with the Chinese kind of greens and oolongs and things, you get really huge leaves that kind of, you know, really do unfurl, and you'll see them, they sort of take up a lot more room in the end. So if you've got them squashed into a little tea bag, you'll sort of restrict them a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brew us some tea in this lovely glass pot, because then you can see that dancing of the leaves, and you can see the kind of colour changing. Obviously we've got these other lovely pots here which are great too. You know, you could brew it in anything. Glass and china are both great for brewing tea.
Does it make any difference to the taste?
I mean, very subtle differences, yeah. And you know, it's again, it's a bit of a cultural thing where the Chinese sometimes use sort of terracotta pots and ceramics and things, which some believe to kind of hold the flavour, and you never wash them, so they kind of keep that really earthy, lovely flavour for a really rich oolong or something. But certainly in the traditional British way, we like our china.
Can I just ask, do I need to warm the pot first?
It's a very good thing. It will just keep the tea hotter for longer, because the cold, particularly china, gets very, very cold, and glass in fact. So the more you can warm the cups and the pots, the better. So yes. The key to making a really good cup of tea is, firstly, very good tea. So we've got a really lovely Darjeeling Second Flush. It's loose, it's orthodox produced. You've got some really lovely big leaves in there, nice chunky silver tips, which is a good sign that it's a really good Darjeeling. You then need to have lovely filtered water and freshly drawn, so don't keep reboiling your kettle. And then getting the ratio of the tea to water right.
I'm very interested to see this.
I'm estimating that this pot probably will do about 6 cups. They're quite small teacups as well. And I'm going to do a teaspoon per head. So spoon that into the infuser.
And is this your perfect teaspoon measure?
It is. So this, I'm slightly spoiled here. I've got a lovely, perfect cup of teaspoon, but just a heaped normal teaspoon will do the job. And obviously you can play around with your own taste. It's very personal. I always encourage people to play around to their own specifications. Exactly. So then we're going to add our freshly boiled water.
Anticipating it's going to taste wonderful already.
That lovely sound of the water going into the tea. And again, another important thing to bear in mind is the temperature of the water. For this lovely black tea, and for all black teas, off the boil is perfect. But if you were doing a green tea or a white tea even, they're a lot more delicate because of the way they're processed. So you need to actually have a much lower temperature. So you don't, I mean, if you're at home, you don't need to necessarily bring, you know, temperature gauges out and anything like that, but you just need to bear in mind that boiling water on a green tea, for example, will burn it, and that's what gives you that sort of bitter flavour that people associate with green tea.
So
It's so funny because I find the green tea really, really bitter, and I just assumed it was just green tea.
Yeah.
No, it's green. I mean, you know, a lovely green tea should be really lovely and sweet and refreshing.
So how long would I wait after the kettle had boiled?
If you just flip up the top of your kettle, that will obviously let it all steam out and give it, you know, leave it 5 minutes. That will probably bring it
Okay.
down. The other thing you can do, which is a bit fiddly and obviously take care when doing it with boiling water, is if you pour it into a mug and then sort of out again and back, that will drop it about 10 degrees. So not to do with children around.
That amber colour is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
Pretty.
so it's a really lovely,
I
a
see
really
if they're
lovely
dancing?
colour. Yeah, they were dancing around
When
when
you
the water
came in,
comes
oh
in, so
no.
they'll continue to.
Well, they
kind
do
of
look
move
like
around
they're
a bit.
filling up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Emily, you need to help us with the dilemma, the oldest dilemma. Do you put milk then tea, or tea then milk?
So it's, as you say, a hotly debated topic, and I'm sure there are keen supporters of both sides. So dare I say which one I support? So certainly traditionally, the tea has historically always been, well, the correct way, let's say, has been considered to be putting the milk in afterwards. But I have to say, from a taste perspective and from a tea perspective, if the tea's too hot, it can burn the fats in the milk, which then gives you a sort of slightly not quite the best cup of tea you've had.
So is that way?
Slimy.
And you
Yeah.
get that little bit of oil on the top.
Yeah,
Oh,
it will
well,
just
you've
it just won't
answered.
bind
I've
quite as
always
well.
wondered why that happened.
Whereas obviously if you're putting the milk in first, then the ratio of the hot liquid to the milk is, when it first hits the milk, is a lot less, which means that it kind of binds a little bit better.
How interesting.
Yeah. There was also a historical reason for putting the milk in first, which was that they believed that because the china wasn't necessarily always really good china, or it was so fine, that actually putting the milk in first meant that the sort of china was protected, if you like, from the hot liquid going in and cracking it.
So they didn't ruin their beautiful cups.
It didn't ruin their beautiful cups.
Mistaken.
But no, it continues to be hotly debated, so
Well, it doesn't matter for this one because it's Darjeeling, so I'm going to have it without milk anyway.
absolutely. So this I really do recommend with that. It's got a really lovely, very unique muscatel flavour, which is a sort of grape word to describe that sort of really lovely aromatic characteristics. The next thing to think about is the brewing time. So making sure that the contact between the leaves and the water is not too long.
So you actually take the tea leaves out.
Actually take the tea leaves out. So the key is to just making sure that they're not in contact for too long.
Should I take that?
Yeah.
Lid back on.
Lid back on. So now what you've got in here is just the lovely, perfectly brewed tea. So you don't need to worry about it going over stewing. Putting the leaves directly in there obviously is fantastic if you've got exactly the right amount of tea for everyone. But what it means if the leaves are still in there is that the next round will be, you know, when you sometimes do it, you know, your granny used to make it with the
Yes.
least leaves in the pot.
And then
And
add
that's
more.
great, and then you can obviously take one of these strainers and strain the leaves out over the cup, which is lovely. But as I said, you just need to get the perfect amount, because if you leave any water in there with all the leaves, it will continue brewing and
Stewed
you'll get
and
something a little bit
bitter.
bitter.
Yes.
Exactly. So, let's have some Darjeeling.
And Darjeeling is in northern India.
It is, it's in the Himalayas. It's very high altitude, which is partly what contributes to its flavour. Tea is just like wine in the sense that you get a really, all the characteristics of the flavour come from the terroir, so they come from exactly how high they're grown, the soil and the climate are all the things that contribute to the different characteristics of different teas. So obviously you get teas from all around the world. Already they're quite different because of the areas they're grown in. But even within India, you've got Assam, which is nestled in the northeast, and you've got very flat tea estates and very humid conditions. And that Assam is sort of really strong and malty and punchy, whereas in Darjeeling, the very high elevations, very steep gardens, you've got a very different flavour, which is unique to Darjeeling.
It is delicious.
Well, thank you, Emily. We have learnt a huge amount.
And we've had a fantastic cup of tea.
Good, I'm glad.